Welcome to Richard and Greg, a channel dedicated to discussion, debate and argument on a whole array of topics. Today we talk to Greg about the current coronavirus figures and if there is likely to be a second wave of infections. It's been a little while since we've undertaken a video podcast, and so we thought we'd provide and look at this subject today, and then either tomorrow or Monday look at the whole issue surrounding Black Lives Matter. So let's go over to our discussion. Welcome to Richard and Greg. The date is Saturday, the 11th of July, 2020. The time, 21:30 GMT +1, so it's quite late here in the United Kingdom. And we have with us, controversially, Greg, who we're going to discuss a coronavirus update with. Greg, good evening.
Good evening. And we're back to some decent weather for a change.
What, at 9:30 at night?
Yep, this is only to prove to everybody that people are exactly as they are described. The English always talk about the weather.
Oh. Well, Greg, worldwide, we have 12.755 million cases of coronavirus. The United States is currently leading the total death toll. The figures I'm looking at the moment exceeds 137,000. And even today so far, over 575 deaths, whereas yesterday it was 849 and the day before 960. We're hearing on the news that a number of states are thinking of, if not closing down, restricting opening because of the spread of the virus. And in the UK, we are actually relaxing our lockdowns, although our death rate's nothing to be overly proud of, with nearly, not quite, but nearly 45,000 deaths. So give us an update. Where are we? What is really happening in your view? And what's the way forward?
I think basically what's happening is that the virus is being beaten into the actual position it is in, not by any of mankind's clever actions or lockdowns or whatever they wish to call it in whatever country, but purely and simply because the scientists, as so often happened, talked up their models too dramatically. We do not have a virus that is anything like as scary as we were expecting. We've been incredibly lucky. No government has played it right because no government had any experience of a pandemic, just as nobody alive had any experience of a pandemic. The last one ended in 1919, and there is nobody with experience from 100 years ago. So we have been fortunate. It is not as virulent a virus as we had first feared it would be. However, it is inexorably marching forwards. We haven't controlled the number of deaths in any dramatic extent. And if you look through the far more important figure than 12.5 million worldwide having the disease and 565,000 have died of it, is the simple single figure of 72.5 people, which is deaths per million worldwide. Now, measured against that, America may have the highest in the world number of cases, and it may have the highest death rate. It also has one of the larger populations, and its death rate is 414 per million. On the other hand, you take countries like India and Russia. India has a death rate of 16 per million, and Russia has 77 per million. Now, sorry, I don't believe any of these figures for a second. I'm not sure what they're telling us, for the simple reason that you can't trust them remotely, because it is obvious that in India, with 849,000 people with the disease and 22,500 who have died of the disease, they have a population of 1.38 billion. So they're obviously not counting the death rate. Now, this is not surprising. It is a vast country. It is a very high level of peasantry who nobody actually notices or counts. Does anyone care if they die in India? India has been a land of famine until the British Raj brought that under some element of control. And although there were areas of famine, the normal cycle of 10 to 11 years between crippling famine abated. Yes, there were instances like the Bengal famine, but those instances were far lower than in the days of the Mughal Empire. You have to look at India in a completely different way when you realize that India produces enough food to export and feed several other countries around the world, were it not for the fact that rodents and pests eat such a high percentage of their crop. Then Russia, with 77 deaths per million. Well, we know that all people with respiratory disease go into a given hospital, and from there on in, they've got respiratory disease and they die of a respiratory disease. Well, if you're not recording coronavirus, well, I guess not many people are going to be noticed dying of it. Britain, on the other hand, we've tried, I think, in all fairness, as hard as we possibly could to have transparent figures. And as a result, we have 660 deaths per million, which is, I think, the highest in the world. But is this just because we have the most accurate records? I think it just might be. But I'm not going to claim any glory on that for Britain, because there isn't a country in the world knows how to cope with this. We are just doing our best. And I think our politicians in Britain, their best has been pretty exemplary from a standing start. And congratulations. We have only had 44,798 people die. Don't forget the pandemic of 1919, between 50 and 100 million people died in 3 years. And then the virus suddenly died out. It wasn't mankind that defeated it any more than I think it is this time. And they talk of relaxing the lockdown. Well, I don't think they have a hell of a lot of choice, because there's no country in the world that can sustain a lockdown where the country stops earning but increases its spending. It's cloud cuckoo land. It just can't happen. Plagues on this planet are, dare I say, biblical. We have the plagues of the Old Testament. Various. We have a plague going on at the moment of locusts in some areas. We also have ongoing climate change. And you will have noticed that 6 provinces in South Africa have had appreciable levels of snow. Well, snow is about as rare as hen's teeth in South Africa. And they are likely this weekend to record the coldest temperatures recorded in history of South Africa. Well, that's a couple of 100 years. And we know that solar flares, spots, should I say, which give rise to the flares, are at the lowest they've ever been recorded. So we're expecting exactly what was predicted back in the 60s and 70s, that slowly and inexorably the planet is moving towards a mini ice age, a maunder minimum.
Well, going back to coronavirus, Greg, what about a second wave? Are we likely to experience a second wave? Because Dr. Fauci is now stating that he believes the number of cases in America, which are currently being reported at between 60 and 70,000 a day, is going to go up to at least 100,000 a day.
I don't think we've got a second wave. I think we've got the same wave with areas of better medical accounting. We look at places like Brazil, where it has taken hold in a big way. And their president now, Bolsonaro, has got the virus, despite the fact that he said it's only a silly little flu and refused to wear a mask for his or anyone else's benefit. This is an ongoing problem. Counting the number of waves we have, it's going to be a constant wave. Some weeks will be bad, some weeks will be good, or should I say, will be better, because there's nothing good about what's happening. But at the end of the day, callous as it may sound, talking of 8 billion people on this planet, 565,000 deaths is really not very significant when you think that if you have a rigid lockdown continue, it's going to be pretty small beer dying of the virus relative to those who will eventually be dying of starvation because the economy's ground to a halt. We have got to go out there and take the risk. And whether it's us going out there and taking the risk of getting a virus, or whether we look at the lifestyle of mankind of yesteryear and just plain having to go out and find food, although you could hear the saber-toothed tiger roaring in the area, it's not that much different. We have just modernized our problem, haven't we?
So what do you think is likely to happen now? I'm focusing on America only because most of our listeners come from America, but it's not exclusively there. But what do you foresee happening? Because Florida is in trouble. Texas appears to be in trouble now. We're hearing other states are saying we may have to look at a further lockdown, albeit temporary. Even in the UK, one of our towns has had a degree of lockdown there. Because of the sudden rise in infections. So how do you see this panning out?
I think it's a matter of leadership. America, I agree, has a problem. It has a leader obsessed with looking in the mirror at his own future. And as with any mirror, it's giving him all sorts of back-to-front pictures. All that really plays on the mind of the upper echelons of the American government would seem to be Trump's obsession with getting re-elected. Now, one of the things he has to do is get everybody back to work so that he can pretend the economy is doing well, and madly fudge the figures and talk up successes in the field of the economy, because, as has been said by so many American presidents in the past, it's the economy, stupid. Well, realistically, it is the economy, because virus or no virus, whether it's 137,000 have died or 1 million die, if the economy has ground to a halt, America is in trouble, and dire trouble, because many people in America live at or below the poverty line without the problems of the economy dying.
And of course, if not below the poverty line, from one paycheck to another, which is not quite below poverty, but certainly highly at risk should they lose their job or that paycheck not be forthcoming. And that is true. There's too little savings in the world now, and certainly in the West, partly because the interest rates are so low so nobody's saving, partly because people are out of work and they cannot save, and partly because now we're all trained, for the want of a better word, or educated or persuaded to become borrowers and not savers. And of course, many have jumped on that bandwagon and therefore have very little savings available. Greg, thank you very much.
It's worth suggesting that investigate the actions of one Chinese company, which has raised, I think it was 2.8 billion in loans by gold plating copper bars and passing them off as gold, which I thought was stunningly clever.
Well, you weren't the lender.
I'm doing it myself. 2.8 billion would come in quite handy.
Yes. Greg,
no, I'll borrow.
I'm cutting you off, Greg. We run out of time. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if so, kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of our videos as and when they are published. And also in the description box below, we place links to certain books, articles, and programs which you may find of benefit, and for which we will receive a small commission should you purchase through our link. And this will help support our channel and to enable us to develop it further.